As June rolled around, we prepared for my dad's birthday barbecue. We were expecting a big group of family and friends to come together to celebrate him. It was a great turnout. Family, laughter, food on the grill, the kind of gathering that reminds you just how important these moments are with the people you love. My husband had been invited, but he didn't attend because he said he had to work the next day on Sunday and that he would be too tired. He did manage to call and speak to my dad during the celebration to wish him a happy birthday, but that was the extent of his participation in the festivities. Regardless, we still had a wonderful time celebrating a great man, my dad. A few days later, the both of us had plans to travel to New York City. This time, it was because we had an interview scheduled at the Canadian Embassy for our sponsorship application. Once he had moved from Italy to the USA, we had also moved our original application from Rome to New York. We boarded an early flight on June 18th, 2024, into New York City, and I remember being extremely exhausted, but we planned to make it a productive and hopefully enjoyable day in the city. We had mapped our journey by metro to the embassy and took our time navigating the trains through the city. By the time we arrived at the embassy, we were right on time. Not rushed, not late, just calm and prepared. We checked in and waited to be called. When it was our turn, we presented a united front during the interview process. First, we were each interviewed separately, and then we wrapped things up with a joint interview at the end. When we left the embassy that day, we were in great spirits. We took our time walking through the city and enjoying the rest of the day. Along the way, we stopped at a few different places, and at lunch, he generously offered to treat me. It ended up being one of the most expensive lunches we
Thanks, babe. One in front of the 5, then dot 00. And then the total. Are you okay? Thank you, sweetheart. Dinner was lunch. This was lunch, eh? Most expensive lunch ever.
During lunch, he had apologized several times because he had to keep stepping outside to answer phone calls since it was very noisy inside the restaurant. He explained to me that he was speaking with the mother of his children. At that point, it didn't really bother me because he had communicated what was going on, and I knew that sometimes things come up when you have children involved. As long as he was being transparent, I didn't really have an issue. During our lunch, we had also managed to talk about what had happened in each of our separate interviews. I told him that I had answered every question honestly and truthfully based on the information that I knew at the time. At that point, I knew that he had 2 children and one son whose paternity had been confirmed through DNA testing. I knew the mother of that child had a second son as well, but there had never been any DNA confirmation that my husband was actually the father of that child. And at the time, there was no other type of documentation available that confirmed paternity. Our intention was for him to move to Canada, and in fact, I had already lined up a very good job opportunity for him through my personal friends and professional networks. He had also started developing an interest in trucking, and the company he would be working for through my friend would eventually help him obtain the proper commercial license after completing training. So from our perspective, everything seemed like it was lining up for his future. The interview that we were on that day was actually a rescheduled one because originally it had been set for early April. But at the time we received the correspondence in early 2024, we were in the middle of a serious crisis in our marriage, in case you remember. Plus, my daughter had had a medical emergency around the time of the interview, so I had canceled the original appointment, unsure if we were even going to move forward at all. But after some time passed and after the guilt of abandoning the application began to weigh in on me, I was able to get the interview rescheduled. We had a leisurely afternoon of sightseeing, and as the day went on, it became harder and harder not to notice just how often he was glued to his phone. Even as we moved from place to place around the city, his phone never seemed to leave his hand or attention. It was constant, and it was really starting to get on my last nerve. Eventually, we made our way back to the airport, and as I sat there on the subway, I couldn't help but think about the irony of it all. I thought back to the first day he arrived in New York City in April 2022. That day, I was supposed to have arrived in New York City many hours earlier, checked into our hotel, and then head down to JFK to patiently await his arrival. I had even found a local videographer on TaskRabbit to video us at the airport when he finally landed. But that's not what happened, though. In actual fact, I ended up missing my flight along with a number of other passengers because we didn't have our COVID test results. Like me, a few of us absolutely had to get to New York that day. So by the grace of God, I ended up carpooling with a few of them, and we drove from Toronto to New York City. By the time I got into New York City and checked into the hotel, I had to ask the videographer I had booked to please meet him at the airport and bring him up to the hotel where I had checked in. That video of us embracing outside the hotel when he first arrived actually looked a little awkward because it was. That night had been filled with so many travel complications and stress. So by the time we finally saw each other, we were both just relieved that the long journey was over. And now, here, years later, we were retracing those same steps together. As we got to the airport and waited for our flight, we weren't overly hungry after our big expensive lunch, so we sat down at a bar. He ordered a beer and I ordered a glass of wine. Time passed and he continued on his phone while I caught up on emails, and after a while, he grabbed a second beer and I ordered another glass as well. By that point, seeing him immersed on his phone, I finally worked up the courage to ask him what was really going on. Was there some kind of emergency with the kids? Like, what exactly had been happening all day that kept him so focused on his phone? But instead of answering my question, he became irritated and he told me that this was exactly what happens when I drink too much. After saying that, he got up and moved to another part of the terminal and sat by himself while we waited to board. It was one of those moments where the shift in his demeanor felt sudden. The same person who had been pleasant earlier in the day now seemed completely different. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was making their appearance again. When we finally boarded the plane, he still wasn't pleased with me. And for the rest of that night, I don't think he said a single word to me. Looking back now, moments like that were small warnings, ones I would learn to navigate carefully instead of react to. One day, I would realize that in order to get the full picture of what was going on, I would need to take very deep breaths and continue moving strategically in silence.